As 2014 winds down, hopes are running high that 2015 will be a calmer and more peaceful year. Global crises affected just about every corner of the globe this year, from Asia to Africa, Europe to the Middle East. Inside the United Nations, top diplomats say the organization's capacity to diffuse conflict has been greatly tested, and some say, well, it's failed. CCTV's UN correspondent Liling Tan has insight from New York.
It may seem as if the world is falling apart as crises pile up and disease spreads. Those were the very words spoken by the United Nations Secretary General as he stood at this podium addressing nations this past September. He was calling for leadership as the ghosts of the Cold War returned and as much of the Arab Spring went horribly wrong. Here's a look at the top 10 global crises that made 2014 one of the worst years in recent memory.
At number 10, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea made headlines again in December. The East Asian country, for the first time, found itself under UN Security Council scrutiny over alleged human rights violations against its own people, including murder, torture, rape, and forced starvation.
Rarely has such an extensive charge sheet of international crimes been brought to this Council's attention.
At number 9, the political conflict in Libya. 3 years after rebel groups toppled the country's former leader, the late Muammar Gaddafi, they now battle for control of the North African state. In August, Islamist militias took over the capital of Tripoli, prompting airstrikes by Egypt and the United Arab Emirates and stoking fears of a regional conflict. Number 8, Nigeria's extremist insurgency. Africa's most populous country is up against the violent Islamist militant group Boko Haram, which seeks to establish a caliphate in northeast Nigeria under strict Sharia law. Boko Haram drew global outrage in April with the abduction of more than 200 schoolgirls, and whose fate remain unclear. At number 7, sectarian violence in the Central African Republic. The chaos started when predominantly Muslim Salika rebels took control of the majority Christian country back in March of 2013. This prompted a backlash by the largely Christian anti-Balaka militia group in deadly tit-for-tat attacks and revenge killings. Number 6, the South Sudan War. Born from a peace deal that ended Africa's longest-running civil war, the world's newest nation is no stranger to conflict. Ongoing clashes between supporters of President Salva Kiir and his former deputy Riek Machar, both locked in a power struggle, have seen thousands of people killed and millions displaced. At number 5, the Ukraine crisis saw the worst standoff between Russia and the West since the Cold War. Widespread protests in Kiev this February led to the ouster of the Russian-backed president and then Moscow's annexation of Crimea. Fighting between pro-Russian separatists and government forces spread eastward as Western nations accused Russia of stoking tensions and sending in troops. Sanctions were slapped on Moscow. At number 4, the Israeli-Gaza conflict. The 50-day war during the summer between Israeli forces and Hamas saw the firing of rockets overhead and the bombing of tunnels underground. Observers put the death toll at more than 2,000, mostly Palestinian civilians, including children. Number 3, the worst Ebola outbreak the world has ever seen. It prompted initial panic and a global response.
As we fight the Ebola virus, it is equally crucial to combat the contagion of fear.
The outbreak, centering around Sierra Leone, Guinea and Liberia, has killed more than 7,500 people, as the number of cases has passed 20,000 so far. Coming in at number 2 is Syria's devastating civil war, now in its 4th year. A barely successful UN joint mission to destroy Syria's chemical weapons stockpile has done little to stem the tide of violence and instability that has allowed extremist elements to flourish. Islamic militants have redefined Syria's borders, massacred thousands of Syrians, and displaced millions more. And that makes ISIL the biggest threat faced by the world in 2014. It has been most visible through videos showing the beheading of Western journalists and aid workers, and through social media. In response, the UN Security Council is cracking down on the recruiting of foreign fighters, while a US-led coalition of countries has conducted airstrikes against ISIL strongholds.
The ISIL threat, ethnic and religious clashes in Africa, the world's worst humanitarian crisis at Syria, and the deadliest Ebola outbreak ever. The UN Security Council has met countless of times this year here at this roundtable to deal with these different crises. But as distinct as each crisis is from the other, they all share one thing in common. They'll be following us well into the new year. Liling Tan, CCTV, New York.
So what to make of all this? I ran through some of those things that Liling mentioned with Kurt Volker. He's a former U.S. ambassador to NATO and an international policy analyst. I began by asking him about Ebola and how the world united to fight the deadly disease.
Well, I think it is significant because without that, it would have spread even more and more quickly. We're not past this, so let's not kid ourselves that, okay, this is now wiped out in Liberia, more people aren't going to get it. We could see another spike. That being the case, though, we have seen the United States lead an effort, along with other countries, to send in doctors, to send in equipment to help contain it, and increase awareness, because one of the big problems early on was people distrusting the doctors that were sent in. So I think that has been a very successful effort by the global community, but one that we can't fully take credit for yet.
And let's talk about the climate deal between China and the United States. This wasn't just about the environment, Kurt, was it? This was about relationship between two countries.
This was something that was important to President Obama in order to have an agreement with China about climate issues. And the positive that you can say about it is that this is the first time that China has agreed to any limit. It had not agreed to anything like that before, so President Obama can say he had a victory. At the same time, he's also committing to reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, and that's important to his political base, that he's showing that he's doing that. So this was very important for President Obama. For China, I think it was important to preserve, basically, is a growing economy for a long period of time. Remember the day before, you had Vladimir Putin making a deal with China about export of Russian gas to China to support the economy, and there's two effects of this. One of them is gas burns cleaner than coal, so it's going to actually, China's going to be reducing this anyway. And it is a strategic energy deal that will power a growing Chinese economy. So I think China is getting a lot of what it wants out of these things.
Let's talk about Iran nuclear negotiations. They missed the November 24th deadline. They agreed to keep talking at least till July 1st. Your thoughts on that process and your hopes? This
was so predictable. We could see months and months ago, Iran felt no reason why, or no interest, no willingness to give up the centrifuges, enrichment, to go further on the heavy water plant that it was developing. It was going to continue with this program. The U.S. and the P5 wanted to see a second agreement go down further from where the interim agreement had taken us. So you could see that neither side was going to move here, and the most likely scenario was that both would agree it's better to keep talking than to have a breakdown and a possible conflict.
So where do you see this going in 2015?
As long as Iran does not test a nuclear weapon and does not openly declare that it has a military nuclear capability, then I think the rest of the world will say it's not worth a conflict with Iran, and we should keep talking to try to get them to reduce their program. And as long as we are still talking with the Iranians and not in an open conflict with them, they're probably not going to make such a declaration or a test.
All right. Thank you so much, Kurt Volker.
My pleasure.
On our focus on international crises around the world, just one way we're looking back at 2014. For more, head to our website. We have posted a collection of some of our most popular and talked about stories of the year. There's a link on our homepage that will take you to that collection. It's all waiting for you at cctv-america.com.